This is an exciting time in Scotland's story, and understanding our past will help us determine our future. And when Scotland's voice is heard, it charts the way forward. This is Scotland Speaks with Alex Salmond.
Welcome to Scotland Speaks with Alex Salmond here on location out and about in Glasgow, where a battle between David and Goliath is well underway. In one corner, we have the might of Glasgow City Council and the biggest social housing landlord in Scotland, the Wheatley Group. And in the other corner, we have the community activists and the tenants of the housing here at Wynford. And the battle? Well, that's around the proposed demolition of these 4 blocks of flats. Now, so far, David hasn't been able to manage a knockout blow, but there was a small victory in the highest court in the land, the Court of Session, just a short while ago. This week, and indeed for the next couple of weeks, we're going to be speaking to some of the residents and community activists who live and work here. The importance of housing cannot be underestimated, neither can the importance of community activism in its respect. Thus, over the next 2 weeks, we hope to highlight exactly what's been going on at the Wynford. And to do so, we start first with Alex, who's interviewing some of the activists and tenants at the Wynford estate.
Well, I'm here in Wynford with 3 of the local campaigners and residents who've got severe misgivings about this great demolition plan. I'm here with Angie, with Kaz and with Peter. Angie, can I start with you? I mean, you're a long-term resident of Wynford, aren't you?
Yes, I am. Lived here for a long time. Lovely place to live in, Wynford. My daughter was about 3 when we moved in here, and she's 47 now.
Time flies,
went
doesn't
to
it?
Wynford Primary School. It flies by so quickly. I went to Wynford Primary School, loved it. My concerns is the place has changed a lot over the years, and a lot of it I feel is due to bad management by factors, decisions.
And you don't think
things.
this demolition plan is a change for the better then?
I don't think so. I definitely don't think so. Why bring down buildings that, if they're okay, sound okay, safe, why don't you just renovate them and let them be used for families to move into right away?
Kaz, I think you'd like nothing better than to have suitable accommodation here, but you've got particular family pressures, don't you?
Yeah, my youngest son Liam is disabled. He's a few different conditions. He uses a wheelchair and he's in a gastric line. He's a stricture in his throat, so it was hard enough to get a rented area that we could afford up here, and coming to the Wynford gave me the community and the price we could afford. I could meet my children's school needs. This demolition and being like 20 feet from 120 block and the hazards that brings would cause severe deterioration in my son's health.
This is your young lad Liam, isn't it? And
Yeah.
you're very worried that the pressure, the noise, the dust of a huge demolition will be very adverse for his own health.
Exactly, yeah, exactly that. He has a stricture in his throat, the dust, the pulling, the time it takes to pull down the flat, the time they recycle all the materials they want to, and the toxic dust would force me out of this home because his health would deteriorate so much it wouldn't be tolerable at all. And I would lose my community, I would lose my location. I've got a kid at Clevedon Secondary School as well who's in 4th year. So it would basically rip apart everything that me and my family have came to grow and love and be part of in the Wynford for the last 5 years.
Now, Peter, you're a veteran of a number of Wynford community campaigns, the school campaign of a few years ago. Is this the worst proposal yet affecting this community?
Well, it's up there with the schools coming down, because the schools were like the heart of the community. They used to say we had a denominational school and a non-denominational school right beside each other. you know, and it was fantastic, you know. The kids would go to the schools, and then, you know, everybody was, you know, it was very, very good, you know, but it feels as if the heart's been took out of our community when the schools went. But this latest thing, you know, I mean, we're in a housing crisis at the moment, homeless housing crisis. When the flats are structurally sound, they could be refitted easy.
Because one of the things about Wynford, I mean, this was a planned community.
Yes, that's right,
and
yeah.
so things like the nature of the different nature of the housing, the tower blocks, the schools, the whole ecosystem.
Yes.
I think that's what architects say. The ecosystem was actually a styled and planned community,
Yes.
and now bits are being ripped away from it.
Yeah, well, the thing is, I mean, I don't know if it, you know, when they built this game, they seem to get it right for some reason. You know, I mean, I've lived in other places in Glasgow, but when they were building this, they just seem to have got it right, you know, for a number of reasons. I don't know why, but it seems to work, you know, the way they built it.
And Angie, would that be your view as a longer-term resident here?
Well, it is my view. I couldn't have said it any better, Peter, because really they have done it a good job. When these were first built in the 60s, they suited everybody. The flats, the masonettes, the bison flats, access to 2 good schools, who my daughter went to, and also went to after school hours, because these schools were our community, where kids went to them, where kids had parties in them, kids had Christmas parties in them. They'd done a big thing in keeping a community together, and they used to have the brownies for the younger children, for the boys as well. They'd done everything in here together as a community, and I'm just very saddened that this is happening in the community that I moved to, and thought I would be happy to live here forever, and I still want to live here, but I'm saddened that they want to take, when they were built in the 60s, that's concrete and metal. They've outlived half of the houses that have been built and had been brought down, you know, so why do this? It just doesn't make sense when we're having a crisis with everything in society just now, you know, financially.
It seems a remarkable thing to
economy and
spend £78 million and turn 600 houses into 300.
Well, exactly. That's, I totally agree. That's my point. Why do that when everybody's struggling? You know, and we need to affordable housing, because that's what this Wynford was about, houses for affordable people to afford.
Kaz, if you had the opportunity to speak directly, let's just imagine you're speaking directly to the Wheatley Group, to Glasgow Council. As a mother, what would your plea to them be?
To retain these buildings, to retrofit them, to extend the social housing stock. Throughout my young son's life, getting houses and waiting housing that are wheelchair accessible and meet the needs of schools in the areas. It's caused me so much disjointed moving. I've moved 3 times, and I've been in the private let sector because I can't get it to the social housing let. To take these buildings down, the houses that they build, I still won't be able to afford. They're not social homes, I won't get them. So again, I'm getting uprooted and moved, and it's ripping the sense of community. I'm a full-time carer, and being part of a community and having things to do and link in and help, as well as having people help me in my times of needs, is very important, especially this day and age with everything that's going on with everybody. So I just see it's like defragmenting people's roots and their emotions, and pushing people that are already in dire situations further down, and the homeless people. It's just ridiculous, the families that are what they're going through.
Peter, you've been a veteran of a number of campaigns. Give me an indication of the determination you think this community has to turn these proposals back.
Well, there is quite a strong feeling in the community, you know, there is kind of like a silent majority, I would say, you know, but I mean, there is the will. If there's a will, there's a way, you know, to try and change what's happening here, but it feels to me as if they're trying to gentrify the area, you know. And this is Maryhill, it's quite a working class area. It's not the West End. The West End's only a couple of miles down the road. Bearsden, well, guys, only about 3 miles up the road, so we're kind of in the middle, right? We're distinctively working class Maryhill. We don't really need gentrification, which is going to put up with the house prices and rental prices in the area, you know. And we're quite isolated. We're insulated from the West End and stuff like that, you know.
Well, Angie, Kaz, Peter, let's hope your voices are listened to. Thank you so much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you very much.
Thank you,
Cheers.
Alex.
Thank you, Alex.
I'm now delighted to be joined by another two of the Wynford residents who are campaigning hard against the proposals, Laura and William. William, if I can start with you, you're the chair of the Wynford Residents' Union, the WRU.
Yes.
So you're leading this campaign. How confident are you you've got the support of the people of this community behind you?
Well, I think the problem we've got is we've been classified as only a small number by Wheatley Group. They don't kind of think much of us that we're going to do anything to sort things out. But I've got the opposite way of looking at it. If we can get more people to slowly join up with the Wynford Resident Union, we'll be able to get more powerful. That's what I think at the end of the day, because I just get fed up with the way they're kind of treating people and no doing the things that I want to see them doing. I mean, they're saying one thing and then they're doing another thing. So that's what they're basically doing.
And Laura, I mean, you're a housing activist. You've seen how you've been homeless yourself, of course. How do you see this situation in terms of what needs to be done?
Well, the way it feels currently is that we have a situation in Scotland where the Wheatley Group are being allowed to dictate housing policy. They're allowed to make political decisions that are affecting everybody in society. So we have a homelessness crisis, as you know, in Scotland that's worse than it's ever been. We've got more families homeless, more children homeless than there's ever been. So Wheatley being allowed to take decisions like this is actually an attack on working people. It's an attack on families, on women, on everybody in society.
But how about their point? I mean, what would they say? They would say, look, we're going to spend almost £80 million. We're going to have certainly less houses, but they're going to be better houses for people. How do you answer that point?
Well, the way they've sold it to people in the Wynford through various newsletters and propaganda that they've been sending out is that this is a wonderful opportunity for the Wynford, this £73 million of regeneration. But that regeneration doesn't involve the basic maintenance, the repairs that Wheatley have been failing to make in this scheme for years. It's not actually going to improve people's living situation. All they're interested in is getting those flats down and getting their expensive mid-market rent houses up to make more rental income. That's their only interest.
William, the Wheatley Group and the council, I mean, they claim there's a futures group, a consultation group, who show overwhelming support for the proposals. Who are the futures group?
So what they're basically saying is the future group are basically based within the Wheatley have created this future focus group that we're not even allowed to even go and see what it entails if we were to sit there and watch it and just keep quiet and see what they're talking about. At one time we were up at the Gilbride Avenue and it happened twice. It was 2 times it happened. We were trying to go up there to try and get in to have our own saying things, but they were like stopping us from getting in there to go and see that, which is against our democratic rights. So the second time they came out, Alex, they came out the second time and it ended up the police were there and with no option but to leave because they might have got angry with us and eventually said, right, if you don't leave you could be arrested, or it could have been breach of the peace they might have brought out.
So you think they're using bully boy tactics?
Yes,
against you?
I do. I believe that they're using that and they're no considering our point of view. Also, I tried to speak to Lindsay Heggie before. She was one of the kind of high up ones. She's not the real. There's always somebody above her as well, sir. And it ended up Lindsay Heggie wouldn't. We've tried for nearly 2 years to try and get word from her to kind of come to the tables and talk over things, but she's refused. She's refused to even do that. She's not willing to come and sit down and speak. So she's kind of just blanked us all out. I don't think that's fair. I don't think that's right to do that to people.
And Laura, I mean, in terms of your housing activity, have you seen situations like this before? What's the motivation of let's say the board of the Wheatley Group, in your opinion? Presumably they're well-meaning people, so why are they being unresponsive to the needs of this community?
Honestly, my faith in the Wheatley Group has gone down a lot since the start of this campaign. I cannot see anything except for the barefaced ambition to make more money and to reduce our housing stock in the process. I mean, the Wheatley Group, the messaging that they're putting out is that all the tenants who were evicted from the high flats are happily housed in good quality. I mean, we know the truth of the matter is that people were bullied. They were threatened with court action, illegally. They were told, people were sent to your door, William. You were getting letters, phone calls daily. It's only people like William who had the backing of the union who were able to dig their heels in and say, no, I'm not going to accept the first offer you give me. I want to hold out for a place that I actually want to live. A lot of people ended up spread all over the place, having to leave the community that they'd known, family, friends in the area. Some ended up in Coatbridge, some in Clydebank, all over the place. So Wheatley have not shown in any way that they care about the effect that has had on people's lives. And anybody that says it's easy to just up and leave your home and go somewhere else has obviously never been in that situation where they've actually had to do it themselves, and they don't understand how difficult that is and the impact that can have on somebody's life.
Now, William, as chair of the Wynford Residents' Union, if you could speak directly to the powers that are in the Wheatley Group and the Glasgow Council, what would be your simple message to them?
My message would be to Wheatley is, you're a disgrace how you want to bring down flats. You've had no consideration of working class people. All you've thought about is trying to bring down all the flats, create mid-market rent houses and tell lies about things. You've no thought about what the impact would be for working class people. That's why we must put pressure on you because of that, and we're going to fight as much as we can to get our way, and hopefully we can stop the flats coming down. That's the main one. We could retrofit these flats and fix them to the standard they were before, and keep the 600, because by them pulling down the 600 flats, that's going to take away 300 homes less than what we've had before. We can't have that in Scotland because we've got a housing crisis in Scotland, but I don't think Wheatley Group even think about that. They're only thinking about how much money they can make out of that and how it looks good for them. So Wheatley, I say to you, keep the flats up and help people that's homeless, and retrofit the flats so we'll have more flats for people for the next 30, 40 years. That's what I want you to do. But you probably not do that because you don't think that way.
A powerful message, William. Now, Laura, is there a better way that you can see for people to be engaged in decision making about their own lives and their own communities?
Well, I think, Alex, it's time for our political leaders to wake up a bit and realise what Wheatley have been trying to do in the Wynford. They've been trying to pit community members against each other, been diverting funds from the community partnership scheme that is supposed to make the place safer and nicer to live in. They've been diverting those funds and using them to spy on union members for trying to have a voice in what's happening to our community. They've refused to let people attend the future focus group meetings. And we were actually told in person that was because we were members of the Tenants' Union, that we couldn't attend those meetings. So, I mean, Wheatley needs to start listening, and also our councillors and our political leaders need to start listening to us and make Wheatley come to the table, because they cannot be allowed to dictate policy the way that they have.
William, Laura, thank you so much for joining me on Scotland Speaks with Alex Salmond.
You're welcome, Alex Salmond. Thank you.
Thank you.
Laura.
Welcome back. Today I'm here at the Wynford estate with Alex, documenting the story of a number of activist tenants who are seeking to prevent the demolition of 600 properties in 4 blocks of flats here on this estate. Alex now speaks to a member of the Scottish Tenants Association, Nick Dury.
I'm now delighted to be joined by Nick Dury, one of the key activists coordinating this community campaign in Wynford. Nick, thank you for coming on to the Scotland Speaks with Alex Salmond.
Pleasure to be here, Alec.
Nick, the argument that you would have is this community is being threatened with the demolition against your will of these flats, 600 social rented houses being limited to 200 or even less. But the other side would say, look, isn't it time for these high-rise monstrosities from the 1960s to come down and make way for better housing, better social housing for the future? Well, isn't there anything in their argument?
Well, they're going to spend £73 million, mostly public money, and we know that these flats can be retrofitted, turned into family-sized homes for far less money. Their own reports state that they can do that. So we're sat here with a massive housing crisis. 16,000 bairns homeless, a city the size of Perth homeless, 244,000 people on a council house waiting list, and here we are getting rid of 600 social rented homes. Now, don't get us wrong, we're not, we're reasonable people. Had the Wheatley Group and the council come and said, we're going to give you 600 social homes as a replacement, maybe we wouldn't have had an argument. But the fact that they were initially mooting 300 mid-market rent homes, now obviously they're not saying that in public anymore, but that's what we heard from one of the local SNP councillors. So we're in the position that, these could be let out tomorrow, handling the housing crisis. They could be retrofitted to a passive house standard, Now
you've got some pretty high power support from some of the best known architects in Scotland. How did you manage to mobilise that sort of interest in what you were saying?
Well, through one-to-one meetings. I met with the Commonweal director, and then we had a discussion with Malcolm Fraser. Malcolm Fraser gave us a number of introductions.
Malcolm Fraser, the famous architect, also chair of Commonweal, the think tank organisation.
Yeah, and that was great. So, we got an introduction to Professor Miles Glendinning, who happened to have a photocopy of the plans for the building, and all these kind of things. So one thing led to another, but we're not numpties sat in the Wynford who don't. We're kind of treated like that, in the sense that like it's mushrooms. You're kept in the darkness, but this is a community with skilled people. We can do that kind of thing.
Because the Wynford, as originally envisaged in the 1960s, was a pretty model estate. It was envisaged as a community with a variety of housing, with the flats, with the maisonettes, with the schools, of course, locally. Yeah. Do you think the Wheatley Group and the council really understand the full background to this area?
I just don't think they see the value in Harold Buto's vision.
Now, who was he?
He was the chief architect for the Scottish Special Housing Association, and the scheme was developed supposedly along the Roehampton model. So it's quite an interesting thing because it was developed in tension to council housing. The original say-so came from Harold Macmillan. So it was a Conservative government was building this to show how you could do public housing well, as opposed to just throwing up houses. And we love this community. We've fought for this community for, as long as I've been here, there has been a residents' association fighting to improve things. And it seems, we've had a change of the guard. We had a new landlord with the Wheatley Group, and they just came in and thought, we'll do the same we do everywhere else, pull buildings down.
Because Harold Macmillan was the greatest force in progressive conservative housing policy as housing minister, later Prime Minister, of course. And John Wheatley, of course, was the greatest force in the Labour Party's evolution of housing policy. Now, the Wheatley have just adopted his name. They used to be the Glasgow Housing Authority. Do you think they're misusing, abusing the legend of John Wheatley?
Oh, I think it's tough. I mean, the way that the Wheatley Group behaves is the way that the GHA behaved before. This is a company created from the largest council landlord in the country, and They demolished, by their own admission, 17,500 homes and rebuilt just over 3,000. So that would not be what John Wheatley would have been about.
He would have demolished 3,000 and established 17,000.
Exactly. We know that the amount of public homes that have been demolished in Glasgow has been a great contributor to the housing crisis. And the landlord that we're up against is, they're the architect of that.
Now, you've had a significant victory in your judicial review against the council. They've had to settle at this stage. But aren't they just treating this as a bit of a joke? I mean, it does seem that propriety work is still going on, despite the agreement in court that they would have a new assessment to see if an environmental assessment's necessary.
Yes. I mean, from the very start, we've been seeking a dialogue, and gunboat diplomacy is the way they play things. So when they erected this advertising hoarding, that was it was an exercise in showing their force. We don't care about the judicial review. We don't care about the fact that the community is against this. We'll do what we damn well like, and that's their attitude. We just don't have a dialogue with them.
So what you're telling me, Nick Dury, is this pile of logs here and tree stump, that this was 7 lime trees.
Yes.
Beautiful lime trees like the ones which are... And they are now being demolished, despite the fact there's been an agreement from the Court of Session in terms of the council reassessing its non-impact assessment.
Yeah.
But at the same time, they're demolishing the trees and going ahead with the preparatory work for the demolition.
Yeah, it's very contemptuous, and as you said, the whole issue hangs on whether there needs to be an environmental impact assessment. And it seems they're almost prejudging if there were an environmental impact assessment, or they're getting rid of the environment to make it easier for them to pass that assessment.
I'm interested in how you can go to court, come to an agreement, and then just bulldoze your way demolishing trees at the same time. It's extraordinary behaviour.
It feels like a tantrum. It feels like an organisation that is just used to being a law unto itself, telling the authorities what to do, and having lost in the court, it's just not respecting the verdict of the court. Yeah, it's very contemptuous of the Court of Session, just as it's contemptuous of the community. They're basically saying, we are the law, we'll do as we like.
So you say that the Wheatley Group are a law unto themselves?
Yes.
And there was time they were brought to book?
Yes. I feel that the Wheatley Group have grown so large, and we hear it from politicians. I wouldn't want to waste my political capital fighting these people because they're so powerful. This is a landlord that got rid of half of its stock, either through demolition or second stage stock transfer, and then swallowed up around 8 other housing associations. So they are based in 19 local authorities now, with control of 93,000 houses. And this is not a landlord that builds houses, this is a landlord that pulls houses down. So our feeling on this is that their intention, and that this is a pilot project for their wider business strategy, our feeling is that their intention is to get rid of the socially rented homes, replace them with mid-market rent homes, and use the Affordable Housing Supply Grant to fund that. And that's the fear, is that this is a pilot project for what they intend to do across the rest of the country.
And finally, Nick, what would your appeal to Scotland's political class in the council and Holyrood be? What would you tell them to do?
Well, there's a huge amount of suffering right now. As I said, there's a city the size of Perth that's homeless. These homes could be let out tomorrow. So have a bit of a backbone. Take on the Wheatley Group. These people are in the wrong, and we can do something good now.
Nick Dury, thank you so much for joining me on Scotland Speaks with Alex Salmond.
Cheers.
Now, in last week's show, you will well remember, we discussed routes to independence. And in that show, Alex spoke to an academic, an SNP MP, a former SNP MP who's now a Rebel MP but an independent supporting MP, and one of the Alba Party's National Executive Committee members. Here is what they had to say.
And my conclusion is that people are so down just now, and there's such a sense that we don't have a route forward, that it was worth putting it out there. But I am worried that what we get is cherry picking and ways of avoiding taking action. And this is my whole argument. My whole argument is that we've got to stop waiting for something that might happen in 12 months or 18 months. We've got to start talking about something that we can do tomorrow. And these are things that we can do tomorrow.
We'll also be saying we need to hold the UK feet to the fire. They've had a really easy time in terms of their constitutional argument over the last few years. And we must make it much more difficult for them to wriggle out that particular set of circumstances. And the status quo, doing as we did over the last few years, where we've had everybody in the SNP knows, and everybody in the Yes movement knows, we've had mandate after mandate without any real change or any change in effect of that mandate being given to the government of the day here in Scotland, or to our group of MPs at Westminster.
And I think what the 19th of October should be a reminder to us all of is the cluelessness of what has happened in the past, and let's make sure there's a better clue going forward, and that best clue going forward is working together so we create a proper event at the next Westminster election that's going to be about independence, that the people can take seriously, that the media can take seriously, and that the world can take seriously. And that should be the no ifs, no buts event.
But internationally, I think we need to demonstrate that we have a coherent narrative, and we have a plan for coherent international engagement. It's no use putting all our energies and efforts into securing independence and then turning to the international community and saying, oh, by the way, we've arrived on the scene. We need to lay the groundwork now. And that is about engaging with the right people at the right time, both individuals, both political parties, governments, and international organisations.
And now to your reaction to last week's show. Kizzy says, wow, so interesting to hear about Admiral Thomas Cochrane. I love these wee history lessons. Thanks, Alex, for all you do. Kizzy then goes on to say, really enjoyed the part with Daniel Jack. He seems a real asset to have in Alba. Donald says, happy birthday, Tismeen. I hope you had a blast. Well, thank you, Donald. I did. As usual, it was a great show. It was interesting to hear Alex tell us about Captain Cochrane. Great history that I'm sure the British establishment didn't want us to hear about. All the best to you both. Keep up the good work. Thank you, Donald. Andrew says, excellent in-depth analysis of the route to independence. I always enjoy this Scotland's Hidden Heroes segment. I think it would make a brilliant coffee table book. Well, Andrew, will think about that. You would know, of course, being an esteemed author. Dom finally says, no more talking from anyone. It's time for Scotland to make her intentions clear and precise every opportunity and become independent once again. Well, there's no arguments here, Dom. Thank you so much for your message. Thank you so much for all your tweets, messages and emails. Please do keep them coming in because you know that is my favourite part of our show. And now to Alex's favourite part of the show, which is, of course, Scotland's Hidden Heroes.
Now, given the subject of today's episodes, it seems highly appropriate that our hidden hero for today should be John Wheatley, the radical socialist pioneer Scottish politician elected to the House of Commons in 1922 in the Independent Labour Party's Annus Mirabilis when they elected 10 MPs from the city of Glasgow to take the House of Commons by storm. By this time, John Wheatley was in his 50s. He already had a substantial career in municipal politics, and he went on to make his mark in the House of Commons. The Wheatley family had come from County Waterford, where Wheatley was born in Ireland, and had established as miners in Lanarkshire. Wheatley himself was a miner, then a publican, then went into publishing in the early 1900s, where he found his meter, publishing a whole series of radical socialist pamphlets arguing for a better society, but also fiercely against the outbreak of the First World War. Wheatley, along with his younger contemporary, Tom Johnson, was actually the intellectual backbone of the Independent Labour Party, supplying most of the ideas, most of the initiatives, and certainly most of the pamphlets and publications. But what marks Wheatley and Johnson out from other great radicals, Clydesiders like David Kirkwood, or the firebrand John Maxton, or the revolutionary John Maclean, is that Wheatley got the opportunity to put some of his ideas into practice. And when he arrived in the House of Commons, he established himself as a major figure in 1924, when Ramsay MacDonald moved into the first Labour administration. He had the good sense to appoint Wheatley Minister of Health, and Wheatley produced in very short order a Housing Act, which is what his greatest legacy was. The Housing Act extended the ability to subsidise, both in terms of amount and in terms of length of time, municipal housing. And as a result of that Wheatley initiative in 1924, no less than 500,000 homes were built over the UK for working people, municipal, good quality standard housing for the people. It's a legacy of which, of course, John Wheatley was and can still be, those who admire him so much, extremely proud. Over the 1920s, Wheatley and MacDonald had an uneasy relationship. Wheatley didn't like the rightward drift of the MacDonald administration, and he never came back into government in MacDonald's second term. He pursued his career in the Independent Labour Party in close association with the other ILP MPs. He died at the relatively early age of a week before his 61st birthday in 1930, but could by then have claimed not just to be the intellectual backbone of the Independent Labour Party, but have seen many of our ideas come into fruition through bricks and mortar, actually the houses that were built as a result of John Wheatley's vision and ability to put his ideas into practice. In terms of being remembered, well, there is the Wheatley College, of which John Wheatley would thoroughly approve, which has done tremendous educational work in Glasgow over these last 30 years. And of course the Wheatley Group, the housing association, the subject of today's programme, which as we've seen has a rather more checkered record, and it's open to question whether the great man would have agreed with some of their current practices. But John Wheatley himself deserves to be remembered. He is one of the hidden heroes because the substance of his vision and practical application is not sufficiently understood. But he joins our pantheon of Scotland's hidden heroes.
Welcome back, and we return to the theme of this week's show, which is of course the housing issue here at the Wynford estate. Alex now speaks to some of the activists who are concerned about the bully boy tactics being adopted by the developers.
And I'm joined by Sean O'Neill, one of the other activists here in the Wynford estate. Sean, you're a campaigner against the demolition of these high rises, but you've had a bit of difficulty in the campaign. Tell us what happened when you were planning to demonstrate against this, against the demolition.
Well, at the start of this year, the campaign ramped up, and so did the backlash that we received for the Wheatley Group and Police Scotland. The issues started arising when we launched a tenant-led occupation, the 120 block over there.
Which block is that, Sean?
It's that one there, so it's this
one here.
If you get the way, it's the first one to go, and my house is just that block here there. So me and my family are like metres away from the blast zone, and if it comes down, I'll be like evacuated from my house and that. So it's obviously a very personal.
So you've got a big interest. If you're going to have to be evacuated. So
exactly.
you've been demonstrating you're not entirely pleased with this prospect.
No.
But so you were kind of occupying the flats.
Aye. So we felt within our rights to do that. It's our community, and there's no good reason to bring them down. But obviously that was a bit of a confrontation.
Of course, there's a long history of occupations in Scotland, from land issues to tenancy issues to housing issues. I've been involved in a factory occupation myself, so you felt that was a legitimate, peaceful protest?
Aye, definitely. I think it's part of our heritage. It's part of working class heritage in Scotland. I personally take inspiration from the likes of Jimmy Reid and the Upper Clyde shipbuilders working. And it's part of Wynnefield history as well. Back in 2011 we had the Save, well, I was too young at the time, but it was the Save Our Schools campaign, and the parents occupied the two schools at the time against the needless cuts at the time then, and obviously the hub, which was what they'd won out of that for the community, is at threat as well with this demolition, because as well as my home, that's within the evacuation.
So there you were, in occupation in the flats. What happened then?
So it was a matter of time before the police came, obviously, and we were arrested on charges of vandalism for basically entering the property.
When I say vandalism, I mean, you didn't, for example, take down the 7 trees that were there. That was actually, the Wheatley Group did that in the last couple of weeks. So it wasn't vandalism like that, you were just entering for your occupation purposes.
Right, aye, and obviously when you weigh that up against the social vandalism of destroying 600 homes during a homelessness crisis and a shortage of social housing that's unprecedented, really, I think I don't feel like a criminal, and I think that's clear. And that's why they've backed off a wee bit due to the campaign and the
So were the
publicity.
police pleasant to you? What did the police say to you? This is the normal police, I take it?
Aye, the officers were all right that night. I think they were expecting, I don't know what they were expecting, but they weren't expecting just normal people that live here and conduct themselves calmly and have a very good reason for being there. We weren't destructive, nothing was broken. I know that I steal it and all that to make a quite important political point. So that was fine. It was the ramifications after that, when it became clear to Wheatley what had happened. That was when the kind of harassment started.
And how did this harassment take place? What did it amount to?
So at the time there was a bit of change in my personal life as well, so I had to have a meeting with my housing officer anyway, but they used that meeting to bring the Community Improvement Partnership in, which is basically just police that Wheatley employ, plainclothed officers who I didn't actually know were going to be there. So I thought it was going to be a conversation about the legitimate tenancy issues that I had at the time, but it became a kind of 3-on-1
So the Community Improvement Police, these are actual officers, but who Wheatley pay the money for them, and they're in plainclothes?
Aye. So as well as that visit, they've been to try and stop the occupation. They've been around here in unmarked cars and stuff and just try to scare us off. But the instance in my home was basically an interrogation, which I wasn't expecting. I didn't have any recourse to legal advice because I didn't know what was going to happen.
And was interrogation without charge? Were you cautioned at all?
They basically told me that because my bail conditions were I couldn't be on Wynnefield Road there. So it was a petty thing. They were like, oh, we've seen you putting, because the bins are there. So to them, that's Wynnefield Road. But
so they saw you outside your house, in other words?
Aye, so they were surveilling me and were like, well, you've broke your bail by doing that. And I says, I don't think that's the case. And obviously it couldn't have been the case because they never took it forward. It was just to scare me off. But they made comments about like my child and my job, as if these things were at threat if I was to continue trying to save the home.
So the community improvement officers were basically saying, look, a word to the wise, young Sean, I mean, you're a likely lad, you've got your family, you're here, but you know, if your job was to go, if there was adverse reports on you, and then what would happen then? Was that the sort of stuff we're talking about?
Just try to think back to exactly what they said. One of them actually said that I would arrest you right now if I could. So they basically claiming that I'd already, like, that was arrestable for going to the bin and putting my bin out. So they basically...
So I could arrest you if I could? I have to say it's not the strongest threat I've ever heard from a police officer.
Aye.
So your argument is this, and I'm going to ask you to respond to this to summarise it. These are plainclothes officers, genuine police officers, but paid for by the Wheatley Group, and you think they're acting in terms of the intimidation as almost like a private police force. Would that be your contention?
Aye, and a political police force as well, and they were set up to tackle antisocial behaviour in the community, which is legitimate, but ended up actually behaving in an antisocial manner themselves. We obviously try to break a tenants movement, which is on the right side of history. So there's real concerns about how they've been deployed, and it sets a precedent for communities in the future and how police are used against people, which we know is a problem in Britain right now as well with the Tory government. So
then the phrase, Sean, are you going to be deterred from legitimate community activity?
No, it's just fueled the fire even further, because it shows that we've made a bit of headway, and obviously they're a bit scared, and I think it was a knee-jerk reaction because they weren't expecting it, obviously, and it was desperate on their part, really. So we know we're getting somewhere, and nah, that won't deter me.
Sean O'Neill, thank you so much for joining me on Scotland Speaks with Alex Salmond.
Cheers.
Now, we've typified the story we've told in today's programme as a David against Goliath struggle. David, in this case, being the residents, the activist residents of Wynford, to the Wynford estate here in Maryhill. Goliath being the John Wheatley Group, formerly the Glasgow Housing Association, and Glasgow Council. They're the big guns in this particular story. And the attitude of Goliath is rather typified by these boardings and the trees that were here until a couple of weeks ago. The point being that this dispute between the Wynford residents, Glasgow Council and the Wheatley Group went to the Court of Session, and there was an agreement that it would be paused, otherwise the council would have lost the judicial review, while the council reassessed whether there should be an environmental assessment. But despite that agreement in court, the developers, the John Wheatley Group, have gone ahead, knocked down all the trees and put up the boardings and the preparatory work to demolish the high-rise flats, the very subject that's under issue. Now the question is, why did they do that? Because that's just a blatant abuse of power. They did it because they can do it. They're trying to make a statement. We're going ahead regardless of protest. But are they right to do so? I doubt it. You know, today's hidden hero was John Wheatley. I know a fair amount about John Wheatley. He's been one of my political heroes as long as I've had political heroes. One of the things I do know is that John Wheatley, whose name has been taken in vain by the organisation or the John Wheatley Group, he would never have had a proposal to start with 600 social houses for rent and end up with 300 or less. John Wheatley, the housing pioneer, would have started with 300 and created 600. That was his attitude. And secondly, one other thing I know about him is he'd always listened to the grassroots, to the people. He was a popular leader. He was unusual among the Clydesiders, and he managed to bring some of his great ambitions into reality by listening to the people. There's precious little sign that Glasgow Council, the John Wheatley Group, do anything but listen to themselves and their carefully manicured groups who tell them what they want to know. I think it's time they started listening to the Wynford group of residents, to the Wynford Union. Because, you know, in the biblical tale, it was Goliath who ended up on the ground and David who ended up triumphant. And now over to Tasmina, who's got some important things to tell us about next week's show on the struggle in Wynford between David and Goliath.
And that brings us to the end of this week's show and part one of our expose on what is happening here at the Wynford estate. Stay tuned for the show next week when we try and speak to the developers and pit them against the experts and see what they have to say too. Meanwhile, of course, please remember you can watch us every week on every social media channel at 9 p.m. And that means we're on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Twitter, and of course, Facebook. Please do keep your messages coming in, and indeed your ideas for shows coming in. Because as you can see, when people write to us and tell us what issues they would like us to cover, as we are doing here today in Wynford, that is precisely what this show does. But for now, from Alex, myself, and all at the show, it's goodbye, stay safe, and we'll see you for part 2 next week.
This is an exciting time in Scotland's story, and understanding our past will help us determine our future. And when Scotland's voice is heard, it charts the way forward. This is Scotland Speaks with Alex Salmond.